This is Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. Joining me now, a 33-year military veteran and advanced B-cell blood cancer survivor, Bobby Hagy, and Dr. Krishna Komanduri of the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, where he's chief of transplantation and cellular therapy. Bobby's going to share his powerful story via Mighty Heroes, the story of CAR T, which is an initiative created by Novartis to educate about this innovative type of therapy and inspire others to be hopeful about the future of cancer treatment. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Dr. Komanduri, what is advanced B-cell cancer?
So B cells are actually healthy white blood cells that produce antibodies. Unfortunately, a subset of those cells can become cancerous and can lead to diseases that are life-threatening, including a form of childhood and young adult leukemia, which is a disease of the bone marrow. And in adults, we more commonly can see a cancer called lymphoma, or again, large B-cell lymphoma. And that can lead to cancerous B cells spreading through lymph nodes, which we know as the glands that swell when we get infection. And unfortunately, those are malignant and if unchecked, will progress and become life-threatening.
Well, Bobby, you were diagnosed a number of years ago. Share your story with us and how you came to find out that you had B-cell blood cancer.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said earlier, the story is that I have 33 years of military service, and over the last 20 years, we've ran pretty hard. Over the course of my travels, returned home one day with difficulty swallowing. I'd had difficulty swallowing for several weeks. And I visited the doctor, and I was found to have a tumor on base of tongue, and was diagnosed with the advanced B-cell blood cancer. Within a couple of weeks of my diagnosis, I was treated with chemotherapy and radiation. That lasted for about 18 months, and I relapsed, and then the next course of action was a stem cell transplant. At 9 months after stem cell transplant, I became ill again, and we discussed, at that point I really felt like I was losing ground. I won't say I was giving up hope, but I can say that hope was certainly diminishing. And that is when we discussed with a doctor alternative treatments, and that's when we were introduced with the CAR T immunotherapies, which has really worked wonders for me. I was treated in 2017, December 2017, so I'm sorry, 16, and am now 3.5 years cancer-free.
Oh, congratulations. So, Dr. Komanduri, we hear a lot about immunotherapy. How does it work, and how does CAR T cell therapy specifically work in the body? Also, if you would tell us a little about the treatment process as well.
Well, great question. Usually we give combinations of chemotherapy drugs, which are toxic drugs, and they actually can cure patients. 60 to 80% of patients who present, like Bobby did, can be cured with chemotherapy. If that relapses, they can get high-dose chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant like he did, and many patients can be cured. But for patients who failed more than 2 lines of therapy like he did, the likelihood of chemotherapy working is less than 10%, and very few of those patients are cured. So in immunotherapy, we're actually taking T cells, and T cells are another form of white blood cells that normally help us to fight infections and other things that we encounter in our daily lives. We take those cells, they're actually sent off to a central manufacturing facility, and there are more than one manufacturer now that has an approved product. They're genetically modified to actually have a receptor that's like a GPS system that allows it to hone in on the specific cancer, like the B-cell cancer that Bobby had. And then they're expanded, so from maybe a few thousand cells, they're expanded to millions of cells in the laboratory. They're sent back to the clinical site, actually just a few tablespoons of cells in a little bag. We give typically kind of low doses of chemotherapy in the outpatient setting for a few days, not very toxic, to prepare the patient. And then they're infused usually in the inpatient setting, though sometimes in the outpatient setting, just one infusion of those cells. Then basically we wait, and remarkably, about 80% of patients, even who have had these terrible prior responses to chemotherapy, respond to treatment. In the trial so far, about 50% have had their disease go completely away, what we call a complete remission. And more remarkably and more importantly, in again, the trials of the two products that were approved in 2017, about 40% of patients appear to be alive and disease-free at least 2 years later, which means they're likely to be cured, and Bobby's almost certainly cured from his cancer now 3.5 years away from treatment.
Wow, that's pretty amazing that you can. I mean, so this is basically then taking cells from his body to use to fight the cancer. How is that medication triggered in the body?
So we normally have receptors that allow each of our T cells to go and search and destroy things that they're supposed to recognize. For example, again, we've talked a lot about vaccinations and viral infections. So if you've had a flu vaccine, you have T cells that go and recognize the flu or other chronic viral pathogens. So what we're basically doing is genetically now, scientists have discovered ways to make, with DNA, synthetic receptors that make them recognize the target that's present on these B cells. So basically genetically modifying those cells. So now they have a GPS system, and I think Bobby and I were talking this morning. He likes the analogy of a smart bomb. So rather than a broadly distributed thing, but something that goes in and kills exactly the cells that we want. And that's basically what we're doing. It's more complicated. It's obviously taken years of science and clinical care, but that's the result. Is we have now effectively a way of turning individual patients' T cells into smart bombs that recognize their cancer.
So, Bobby, this is your miracle, isn't it?
This is my miracle drug.
You're sharing your story with CAR T cell therapy through the Mighty Heroes campaign. Why don't you tell us about that?
So I'm glad you mentioned the story. Stories are very important to me. For a military, telling your story is a large part of our culture. It's used to build confidence. It's used to provide mental energy to young soldiers that maybe have not faced what the more senior soldiers have faced. And so telling a story has been a huge part of my life in the military. And with CAR T, my treatment with CAR T is no different. If I've been somewhere that someone else maybe is headed, and I can tell a positive story and help them out, it's all about getting people through the next objective.
So Bobby, I want to share the two websites that we have with your story and others. One is my-lettertheroes.com. And then our website at the Sylvester Cancer Center, sylvester.org/CART, have information for both patients and referring physicians and Bobby's remarkable story.
Wonderful. So if someone's been diagnosed with B-cell blood cancer, is this treatment something that his or her doctor would be aware of and make known to them, or do you have to know and ask the question?
Well, it's a great question. We would hope that people would know about these things. They've been really, groundbreaking. They've been on the cover of Time and Newsweek, not to mention the New York Times and other places, scientific journals. But remarkably, in a little over 2 years since these two therapies were approved by the FDA from two different manufacturers, we think less than 20% of patients who meet the criteria have actually received the therapies, and there are a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that there appears to be more ignorance than I would have expected. So it is really important for patients to actually act as their own advocates, and it's important for us to alert even physicians who we would hope would have known about these therapies, but clearly need more information. And we really appreciate your taking the time to allow us to do that today.
Well, I want to thank you, Bobby Hagel and Dr. Krishna Komanduri, for sharing this story with us. Those websites one more time, please.
my-lettertheroes.com and then sylvester.org/CART. And really thank you for your time and your great questions.
Continued good health, Bobby, and thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week. I'm Audrey Adams. Join me here next week for more insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversation and information on Talk with Audrey. Be safe. I'll see you next week.